Hello. Welcome to the Self-Consciousness Podcast in its newest iteration after a 6-month break. My name is Jennifer Way, and I am your host, guide, friend, as well as a bunch of other things: psychic, intuitive, energy healer, comedy show producer, etc. I do hope you have been well. If this is your first self-consciousness episode, welcome to my world. I encourage you to start from the beginning, especially if you are new to exploring your own personal spirituality. This podcast is a peek into my own spiritual journey, an excavation of people, that sounds weird, and subjects, really, that I find fascinating. And most of all, it's a way for you to explore along with me. Now, I'm well aware that I have not put out an episode this year as of yet, and that consistency is definitely not the strongest of my qualities. However, I have grown to place more value on seasonality. Okay, essentially, I'm just giving you my excuses. So I spent the first 5 months of this year, 2024, focusing on producing the weekly episodes of the Sacred Comedy Podcast, available now on all platforms. Check us out on YouTube. 20 episodes of spiritual hilarity. But I took a break for summer because seasonality, and now that we're in June and it's, finally summer break for my kids, I just thought it would be a great time to jump back into my other podcast with the exact same initials, not done on purpose. And so I mean, if you've been here for a little bit, I'm a Gemini, and as a super, super curious Gemini, I've always been attracted to new modalities, new philosophies, new people, and this year has been no different. So today's episode is an amalgamation of new experiences, revelations, what have you, and a little bit more of, I guess I had to wait until this point in time to have more of an integrated perspective, because there was a lot of processing that happened, and a lot of sort of channeled wisdom that came through. So I think now I just feel more ready. And here's why. I started the year off with a psychedelic assisted journey that, with the help of a guide, that it really opened me up in a way that I hadn't been open before. So many jokes can come from that. But it was exciting for me, really, just to try something new and to understand a little bit more about using psychedelics and what that really means to me. Because I last year I did try some microdosing, and that didn't go so well. So for me, it's really hit or miss. But I'm understanding more about my body, and that kind of brings us to 2024. The theme for me right now is health, physical body, being embodied, really taking care of all of the sort of habits or things that I have just kind of left. Really, I just have not been very conscious about them. I've been conscious in so many other areas of my life, and I almost reserved things for me like food, eating disorder, these kinds of issues. Like, they're really deeper stuff that I just didn't want to look at. And even money, I've left those to deal with till now. So really, sort of the last 6 months of 2023, and this first 6 months. So I guess the whole solar return up until my birthday. So I'm opening. I'm feeling myself. I'm feeling myself. I really am. So the goal for my psychedelic assisted journey, which is a really important part of any of these modalities, is having an intention that feels true for me, useful for me, and timely. And the main intention was I really wanted to feel more freedom within myself, and I wanted to get to a closer place of truth when I spoke. And I really was just so ready to fall in love with myself, to stop the patterns of beating myself up, self-deprecation verbally with other people, socially, even, to sort of like, to make people feel more comfortable around me, whatever it was. But I was just kind of ready to let all of that go. And now that I'm on TikTok semi-regularly, self-diagnosing, oh, I'm definitely autistic. Oh, I'm definitely, there's so many things I'm seeing on there that just make a lot of sense, but just kind of stripping these layers through the intention setting with this journey was really important. And it also allowed me to really slow down, because that was the main message in the beginning. There was, I can't even say that was the main message. There were just so many. There was a moment, a couple of months back where I felt my natural state. One of the things that was also involved with the psychedelic assisted journey is the person that I worked with who guided me also was giving me lots of books and processes that would help me in my particular issues that I wanted to work on. And one of those things was parts work. So parts work, if you know of Dr. Richard Schwartz, he talks about parts work. Greater Than the Sum of Our Parts is the name of one of his books. He's got many books. He does a lot of work in this area, and I found it pretty fascinating and very helpful. I honestly, it wasn't the main thing that got to me, but using parts work became helpful. I saw the magic in it. I really understood it quite well for the goal of really me understanding every part of myself, integrating them fully, and not rejecting any more parts or keeping them in the shadows, if that makes sense. So going through these processes, I had a moment, I don't know if you've had this, where I literally felt myself shift into a different dimensional existence in a waking state, not on drugs or anything, I don't think. I don't think. But I felt myself shift into a more natural state that was true. And it was so quick. It was almost like, an envelope opening and then it closed and disappeared. But something opened and something released. And I felt that familiarity. And I know this was on a day where, so the other part of this year that I've been very much into is I got a job, and it's a job I've never had before, and it's waiting tables at a vegan restaurant. And it's not just any vegan restaurant, it's a vegan cafe owned by two wonderful sisters who have had this cafe for 20 years. I've been going there for the last 15, both intensely spiritual, both intensely psychic. So working with them has just been so healing for me in so many ways, just because I've felt valued. It's just kind of the right place at the right time. And I'd been getting messages all last year from guides that were like, we love sacred comedy and all, but you just need to kind of get a job. So getting this job, which from one of my youthful perspectives could have felt like a step backwards, could have felt like, Jesus, I'm making minimum wage here. Jesus, I'm doing a job, I'm taking a job away from like a teenager. There were so many things I could see a thought blossoming, but so much of me has changed my fundamental definition of who I am and the value that I place on myself, that it didn't matter. It didn't matter. It didn't matter that I went to college. It didn't matter that I, climbed a little bit of a corporate ladder, got to a pretty good position, made a good amount of money at some point in my life. This job right now makes sense for me because I'm putting energy into something I actually believe in. And while the financial rewards have not, been felt, I am making money, which is more than I hadn't been last year. So It's a good feeling to release all my previously held beliefs about that kind of work. I feel pride in my work. I feel happy to talk to people. And boy, do I talk to people. I get in trouble for it all the time. Anyway, so this day that I had sort of felt myself jump, it was almost, I guess in old terms, I would have said it made me feel like I jumped out of my body, but I didn't jump out of my body. I jumped into a deeper resonance of myself. Like those moments I've had in dreams where I'm like, oh, I get it. Everything. I'm everywhere. I'm everything. And it was just so quick. And it was a day that in particular that I had been working. I worked the whole day in 2 separate, very long shifts. And the reason for that at the time, it was like my penance for calling out sick earlier in the week when I was suffering from essentially what was a self-imposed food poisoning. And then of course, like, wow, self-imposed food poisoning. It's actually a thing. Look it up. It's actually a thing. People do that. I didn't know I was doing it. Shouldn't have done it. But, my body was trying to tell me something, I wasn't listening, and then boom, voila. Anyway, so my natural state, right? This had all kind of come about when I was doing some kind of clearing work. And in this split second where I felt my true natural self, I realized that all these years I thought I was solving a puzzle. And in actuality, I was identifying, noticing, and or releasing the shields, the binds, the blindfolds, the coverings, the glamorization, the self-idolatry being pushed outward, the tendencies, the ropes, the chains, the potato sacks. So I couldn't believe that in just this split moment that happened. I realized I was peeling the garlic of my personalities. And now this, or the onions, like depending on which best-selling author or psychologist you identify with, all of this forced me to examine my more natural tendencies, my more natural fears, and my more natural truths. And I definitely have multiple personalities. And this is something I've grown to understand that everybody does. Some have this on a more extreme end of the spectrum when that becomes a disorder, but everybody has multiple personalities, so many parts to themselves. Again, I do recommend doing parts work, or at least listening to Richard Schwartz on some podcasts. But just in this moment, I felt the whole her underneath. I could feel in that slight moment that all I needed to do was soften, to relax back into myself. But as soon as I found that awareness, I pulled up the strings like a cloth jewelry sack, just tightening it up. But that's all it was. It was so simple. Just relax. Just relax. Just be who you were. But it was at such a more visceral level than I had been allowing myself to feel or to experience. I feel like there is something that I want to read because I really just understood what the whole her meant. It's something that Lucy Pearce, who I interviewed for Divine Feminine Rising, that series, go back and have a look at it. She's an author and a publisher, that we are experiencing the feminine through ourselves, finding that softening. The title of one of her books that I was just kind of looking into. Reading books is very difficult for me. I have to bounce around. I don't have... lately, it's very difficult for me to read. So, but the title of one of her books is Burning Woman, which honestly just at the time was making me think of menopause. But anyway, so she had posted on Instagram an excerpt from Burning Woman, and it ties very much into what I was feeling and what I'm trying to say. More on menopause in a bit. Here's the quote. The deep feminine, the mystery of consciousness. She who is life is longing for our transformation as much as we are. She holds back, allowing us free rein to choose, nudging us occasionally with synchronicities, illness, births, and deaths. But when we make space for her, she rushes into all the gaps, engulfing us with her desire for life and expression. This is what she longs for. This is what we are for, experiencing the feminine through ourselves. We simply need to slow down and find where to put our conscious attention. And it is this willingness to look again, this willingness to put consciousness onto our places of unconsciousness, to express what we have always avoided, which starts the process of unblocking so that she may flow through. It really encapsulates everything, and I'm probably going to be repeating more of that in other ways on this podcast. I was experiencing heavy menopausal symptoms. I still am. A little bit less so because I decided to stop drinking coffee and stop eating sugar, which really gets rid of those night sweats, let me tell you. It's like night and day, so quote me on that. See if it works for you if you are experiencing menopause. Anyway, this is also happening around this time that all of these revelations are coming through. And I thought to myself, like, okay, how am I going to get through menopause? You know, it can be kind of depressing because it's the years you are of value to society when you're reproducing. You know, they start looking at you right when you're 13 and they just examine you until you're, just over the hill. But when you think about it, now going through menopause, or hopefully on the other side of it, I get to be who I truly was. I'm returning to the state I was in. Well, the last time I was in it was 34 years ago. It was me before puberty. It was me before, my parents kind of screwed up our household. And while I am okay, I'm done sort of processing all of that, I can still appreciate the truth of that experience, talk about it with hopefully neutrality. But, coming back to this truer self, it felt like the true ghost haunting. I think, okay, I'm processing this live, so bear with me. In the past, it felt like a ghost of myself, something more foreign to me, something to be scared of. And I guess in that moment of feeling that envelope open, that sort of screen into another dimension of my truest self, like hopefully what happens when you die, when you shed the skin, you realize how much limitation, how much resistance we have built up within ourselves, and part of that resistance felt like it corresponds to this transition of menopause, this transition into another stage of life for me. So it was just, just exciting. So, that sort of jump into another dimension, like in the waking state, again, it happens so super quickly. You almost miss it. I had this feeling a couple of years back around COVID when I was like, I was like in my kitchen and for a split second, I realized I had entered a different dimension. It was in the same place, the same existence, but it just felt like a sliver of a dream. And then it snapped back away. So I'm excited for what this means because I know this is what the lifting of the veil is. Because it was like a peek through the veil, but I felt it in my body. It was so strange and it was really so beautiful. In this whole journey, this earlier part of this year, I'm noticing a lot more sensitivities, hearing, smelling, like way more than before. So I want to ask you, are you feeling these things as well? What are you noticing? I find it's difficult for me to be online and following spiritual people, which I've really kind of stopped, except for like a handful, because I believe that I'm very quick to assume someone else's experience as my own and sort of digest it. Almost in a way, it's like we're so scared of experiencing like true life sometimes. It's like, it's if you are someone who jumps out of your body often or escapes often, whether with food, weed, sex, whatever, obviously all of these things are me, or alcohol, jumping back in, it really is just a return to your original state, a return to knowing. So I'm curious, and that intense sensitivity, it's scary coming back to who we truly are, because you just feel so vulnerable there. So I really had to hermit up myself. So, this all had me also thinking about the idea of feelings and how we have shit on feelings for so long. And I think now, you probably know this, everyone is more aware that feelings are a thing, and feelings are things we kind of need to allow. But one thing I realized that we still haven't done yet is we still haven't given the legitimacy to feelings that it actually deserves, because it struck me that emotions cause physical reactions, right? That we have taken for granted. An emotion, a feeling, causes a physical reaction of crying, of tear ducts being flooded. An emotion, hearing a baby cry after you've just given birth, causes a physical reaction of your breast milk to fill your boobs. We call that the letdown. And if you're a man listening to this, it's really cool. Or if you're a woman who has not experienced breastfeeding or have tried, I'm sorry, because it's a big test of an experience. It's a huge challenge for so many women, and it can be really upsetting and triggering and all those things. But when you breastfeed, when you are breastfeeding, if you hear a baby cry from far away, your boobs will swell. You'll feel the letdown of milk. The glands will signal, drip down. You'll literally start dripping out of your nipples. Beautiful, yummy, and which is fun, like in public places. Let me tell you. Then you have to basically wear, just on another note, you have to wear like maxi pads in your bra. Anyway, so it's an emotion that creates a physical reaction. Anger, you can see physical reactions in people. You see heart, like blood pressure spiking. You see, a red face. You hear an elevated voice. Emotions and feelings have to be respected. It's so much more significant. How we feel determines what happens inside our physical body. We really have to give them the respect that they deserve. But we still have made them unimportant. I mean, we have to shake hundreds of years of not being connected to our own feelings, not even to our own thoughts, especially if you're a woman. Could you hear that? I don't know. I feel like I just completely mumbled. I've just been hanging around teenagers too long. We've been encouraged to toss our feelings aside. For myself, more specifically, I trained myself to toss my feelings aside in order to be that perfect friend, in the hopes that I too could have one. Desperate. Sad, but true. And the truth is I did end up being one, that perfect friend, but just not to myself. And this is the year I decided to become that perfect friend for myself. Also, in examining these parts, as I more consciously went through situations that would be triggering, which I adore this, but the woman who coached me on this said, you get to a point where you actually look forward to the triggers because they're going to up-level you in such a significant way, and to release any tension that you have around them, because ultimately they are present in your life to reflect something that you can take in, you can integrate, you can expand from them. We all know you can expand from things that trigger you. The trigger is just the message. The trigger should never be a limit. I don't love all these trigger warnings about stuff. It really takes away people's autonomy in a way. Someone told me that they were going to say something to me that was going to trigger me, and the first thing it did was piss me off. It's taking a lot of liberty to tell someone that you're going to trigger them. Triggers, I don't think, are meant to be in stasis. Triggers are things that are meant to move things around. A trigger is temporary because it's a message. More than anything, it's a message. It is that flag. It is that, bright neon sign. It is that thing that you need to excavate, to dig, to learn, to explore, to heal, and to integrate. So don't make an enemy of triggers. Use them for your growth. That's what they're meant for. As I started to integrate this trip, the journey that I took, I was digging into the triggers, and although scared, although very fearful about them and having to go willingly through experiencing the emotional ups and downs, what I found was the more I did it this year in a sort of heightened state of awareness, because your state of awareness can just keep getting bigger. That's what it is. And I think you can decide to do that along with the energies and all the changes and the sunstorms and blah, 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 and the expansion. But you choosing to expand is what expands you. It really became a journey into releasing my own fear of loving myself. Ooh, I've never said that out loud. I think that's really what it is. I was scared of loving myself, I think. Wow, really processing live right now. Thanks for listening, everybody. Truly afraid of what was underneath. So the more parts work I did, the more I moved through my thought processes consciously, the more I went into environments that embraced me, the more I spent time around the people who love me and the people who check in with me, the safer I felt in my own skin. And that just created an absolute, it tapped into all the reserves of divine feminine in my life that I've been wanting to infuse in everything. And it's through me, through my expression and my choice making and my angling myself in other directions towards love, always towards love. I no longer beat myself up. I've learned a little bit more about when to stay silent and when not to. Not perfect at it. Still spill my guts. I learned how to really be aware in the moment as much as possible and to slow down. I mean, it took a bunch of times for me to remind myself to slow down. A huge thing that happened within a week of doing this journey is I was scammed on Instagram and then ultimately hacked. So I lost all of my Instagram stuff and I felt grief for the first time. I felt pain in my heart. I could feel it. And I was like, oh, that's new. Because I don't let myself feel grief. I don't like to. I don't want to. Yes, and I understand the ridiculousness of that statement. But it's true. It's true. And I love myself, so I love that truth. And I love myself enough to know that it's a goal of mine to feel grief, to make space for my own grief. And I'm more disciplined in it as a byproduct, not as the intention to be disciplined with it. Does that make sense? Becoming disciplined with something was a byproduct of loving myself more fully. Flossing is literally a byproduct. It's not something I wake up to decide. I feel it in my body. I want to do this. Moving back into my body. Recognizing all the places I try to jump out. Recognizing all the ways I try to escape. So slow, such a slow process. And if you're in the process of doing this, I celebrate you. I love you. I honor you because it's so important. It's so much work. It's so much responsibility, but it is the most rewarding responsibility ever because you get to live more fully embodied in this life. And this life is beautiful when you decide it to be. Let me say it better. When you decide it to be so. I sound more witchy that way. My journey into exposing more of myself to myself, not necessarily, which funnily enough makes me want to expose myself less publicly. And I know that in the past on these episodes and everywhere else, whenever I'm making content or talking on a podcast, I go very open too quickly. And that brings me to another aspect of the garlic that I peeled, is that when I get down to the bottommost layers of who I am, I was recognizing the weird little girl. And she has been hidden for a really long time. And when I'm honest with myself, and I take all these autism spectrum tests, I recognize that I have autistic sensibilities and behaviors. Whether that was learned, whether that's part of ADD, whether that's a part of just who I am, whether it's on a very low part of the spectrum, but yes, definitely on the spectrum. There was a part of me that was like, no, you don't need the label. I did go to a therapist once who's like, why do you need the label of ADD? Do you think you are? Fine, I'll tell you you are. And it was just kind of like a weird conversation. And I was like, fuck you, bitch. Anyway, I think for me, that part, like I ingested that part. I was like, I don't really need a label. What do I need a label for? So I can over-identify with yet something else. And I was like, well, what I can do is I can look at things that are helpful for autistic people. And if they help me, then they do. And the label is just a label. It's a construct. It's whatever. And then I slept on it. And I was like, let me think about this. And then there was a little girl inside of me who was crying. I need to know. I want to know. I want to know that the reason why I always felt different was something that people understand better now. I'll put it that way. And that wasn't just dismissed or bullied out of me. It was very much bullied out of me by members of my family, most of the members of my family, not all of them, but many, enough to make a significant impact on how I behaved. That having this, it's not a diagnosis because it's too expensive to get diagnosed these days. Oh, by the way, it costs $6,000 to $7,000 to go to the doctor who will diagnose you, which is really disgusting. But hey, that's America. But after taking the most reputable tests that I could find, it definitely indicated I am on the spectrum. Definitely not autistic. So the masking was it. Thanks, TikTok. I'm becoming a bigger fan as the days go by. But yeah, the masking was something that I really identified with. And I'm so grateful that I'm finally at that moment where I have unmasked enough, because I'm sure there are still ones that are there, and I accept that. But having the ability to unmask enough to recognize the beautiful little girl, the beautiful little weird, strange girl who didn't understand the world and didn't understand why the world didn't understand her. Really in love with life, the world, people, everything, animals, beautiful nature, beautiful things. And that got shut down really quickly. So being able to rediscover her, that brings me closer to my own divine feminine, and I can embody and I can continue what that little being came here to do and to be and to experience in a more free way. And it really was just a sense of internal liberation that I continue to experience and have committed myself to. So, yeah, healthy eating for me has always been a struggle. I am a binge eater. I have struggled with an eating dysfunction all of my life, very few times I didn't, really, from the very beginning of my life. I came from a dysfunctionally eating family as well, eating for emotion, especially when there wasn't emotional needs being met. I can talk about that intellectually now, but it has, my whole life I always knew that I'd have to deal with this issue. And I've ravaged my digestive system in the meantime, which is why I can barely eat anything. I find ways, trust me. I just sit in pain. But whether it's becoming vegan or whether it's following a low FODMAP diet, nutrition, I realized, is so much more important. The thing is, I knew that it was important, but I felt guilty that I couldn't be healthy. So I just ignored it. Just ignored it until my body started screaming. But nutrition is so important for me because I see how it is so tied to hormones. And during a menopause experience, I'm realizing just how important nutrition is for me. And I think for anybody. So I offer that up. And I hated talking about it because it was such a sore spot for me. But we can open up and soften to this. It's always going to be healthier to eat more plants. Can't escape it. And we really have a really very poor diet in this country. Whatever. I don't care. I don't care what everyone else is eating. And I care about what you're eating. No. But I had to care more about, honestly, what I was eating. Because as much as I love healthy, organic, vegan food, I also love junk food and highly processed food. So this Gemini it has needed to find balance so much, but it really escaped me for such a long time. So again, it's coming back to that. It's not a matter of discipline. It is a matter of self-love. The discipline is a byproduct after you find the next level of love in your journey for yourself, whatever that is for you. So getting deeper into that, making that really be your focus. All the other stuff comes with it. We intent through spirit, and then the physical manifests itself more quickly. We just have to be more aligned spiritually. And while I've already talked for almost 40 minutes, I just want to go into a little bit more about the eating disorder and kind of the work that I did around it this year, because I do feel like it can be helpful for other people. I don't think I've talked about it too much on this podcast because I honestly didn't think I needed to. But something about what I've experienced this year and some writing I did earlier, I feel like it's something to talk about. I think a lot of people can relate to it. When I dig into the feelings that I have when I binge, and I've been trying to work on this for, again, my entire life, that's 48 years. When I'm in the midst of a binge, I've tried to check in and be conscious of it, aware of it. And what I've noticed is whenever I've done that in the past, there's a part of me that just puts a wall up right away. And it's like, no, saving this for me. This is mine. You can't take this away from me. And into that feeling, when I dig in a little bit deeper, again, she shuts me out. She will not let me. And this is a huge part of where parts work came from when Dr. Schwartz talks about it. It came from his work with working with patients who had eating disorders. For me, I felt like I deserved to binge. So it felt like a reward. And it was the one thing I didn't want to control, because it turns out, as laid back as I am, I do definitely want control over things, because it's scary if I don't have that control, or if I can't control things. And I'm only identifying that as a behavior that I've observed in myself. It is something that at this point is a little bit more cleared out. I do not hold tightly to this idea of control as much anymore. But at the time, when I looked into that binge, I could see the inverse of that controlling thing. It's like, it's a one place I did not want. Control is, and I wanted to be free in that eating. So riding along on this menopause adventure, it was the irregular hormones were taking the driver's seat. And this came from all of that eating. It's like a chicken or the egg situation. The irregular eating, meaning for me, that means like eating when you're not hungry or being forced to eat when you're not hungry. Especially with, for me, very well-known ancestral trauma of starvation on my father's side. As well as like having panicky and paranoid Jewish mothers. That's all ancestral shit. There's an over-focus on food in my family. And that created a lineage of overeaters with complexes. Do you remember they used to say that all the time? Stop, you're giving me a complex. Don't give him a complex. Whenever people talk about food or notice your body or talk about what you're eating, for me, that's a very sensitive thing to do. And it's interesting now that I work in a restaurant, in a place where people are coming to me and they're asking me what they should order. And of course I launch into a speech and I'm like, you need to take responsibility for what your stomach wants. Close your eyes and ask it. You cannot put that responsibility on another person. I don't know what you like to eat. Don't let me own that. You should own your choice of what you want to eat. If you're not sure, learn about what works for you, what you're in the mood for. Ask your stomach what it wants. Anyway, of course I launch into this at work. And of course I work in a restaurant after dealing with like a food. Anyway, I know I'm not the first person to experience all that, but it's just funny. It's just funny to me. It's all new. But, I always felt like fat is a way to build up layers of your body, of yourself. And, you're disconnecting from your body as much as possible. So in fat, it's like there's something very uncomfortable in here, but it's just buried so deep. So when I binge, I'm out of control. I give up control. I throw caution to the wind. I don't want to be limited. I delight in excess. So now I'm living, or at least I recognized that I had been living in a body that reflects that. So, this is all here in an effort to excavate that final electron, to return life to that part, to revive her or to revive him. It was the part of listening to myself, trusting my feelings, understanding my confusion and my own feelings about things in my life. There was a restriction in the breadth of acceptable feelings, of acceptable actions, acceptable reactions, and acceptable thoughts. But one of the things I'm realizing is that I'm finding all these connection points, and they're so subtle, and they're almost whispers. But the more I connect back into them, the more quickly I find that alignment. And I wanted to just share that with you because I feel like, wouldn't it be great if we all just got further in our own self-discovery? God, can you imagine if people were honest with themselves? And that we all shed our own emperor's clothes, proudly bearing our truest selves, without reservation, without restriction. And for me, that's meant a lot of things. And I hope that this resonates with you in some way, shape, or form. Please reach out and let me know. You can email me at jen@jenniferway.com. Nice and easy. So that's going to be it for me. Thank you for sticking around and staying a follower and staying a listener. I realize that putting the energy into Self-Consciousness podcast has just done so much it's done a lot for my internal development. So thank you for witnessing it. Thank you so much for witnessing it. And I witness you, even though I'm not there with you right now. I am there with you right now, and I'm just sending you so much love, appreciation, and affection. And take that in and spread it around a little. And may the divine feminine be with you.
Let's dance in style, let's dance for a while. Heaven can wait, we're only watching the skies. Hoping for the best, but expecting the worst. Are you gonna drop the bomb or not? Let us die young or let us live forever. We don't have the power, but we never say never. Sitting in a sandpit, life is a short trip. The music's for the sad man. Can you imagine when this race is won? Turn our golden faces into the sun. Praising our leaders, we're getting in tune. The music's played by the madman.